Welcome back to True Eagle. At the moment, we're about a week out from round one. I'm going to release this video sometime in the future, but as it currently stands, there's a lot of negative swirl about the West Coast Eagles. We've been struggling for a couple of years now, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but that tunnel is pretty damn long. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to reflect on some of the best individual moments or games even that I can remember as a West Coast Eagles fan. Now, I've been watching the Eagles since about 2002, and to be honest, there's more than 10, and I've actually got 11 in here. I'm going to put top 10 in the title. Who puts top 11 in a title? Either way, I've got a bonus one for you if you like. But in moments like this, when the club is down, it's nice to get back in touch with some of the best moments we've had as Eagles fans. So this video spans 11 different memories from 2006 to 2021. And let's go back to 2006. Now, the sad realization I had in making this video was that 2006 is starting to get a little blurry for me, which is crazy because I used to just watch. I had the DVD of the Eagles Premiership season and another DVD of the Eagles Grand Final in 06. And I watched that over and over again, both of them. So I do have pretty good memories, but either way, as time goes on, you get a bit older, you lose a little bit of touch. But two that really stand out for me, first of all, was when we played the Cats in Geelong at what was called Skilled Stadium back in the day. Now, we hadn't beaten them there since 1999, and this game remains the only time we've beaten them since 1999. But my recollection of this game, it was just nuts. I used to do taekwondo as a kid, and every Saturday or Sunday, it used to change. I had to go to training and get the shit beaten out of me. And I remember, as I was starting to get ready, I do distinctly remember the scoreline reading 85 to Geelong, 31 to West Coast. Now, Geelong finished 12th that year, and we were obviously a premiership contender. And while obviously Geelong would become an amazing team in future years, this scoreline of 85 to 31 sat well with nobody. But as I was starting to get increasingly ready for training, the Eagles just started to peg a few goals back. And even though we started to kick a few goals in the last little bit of that third quarter, we were still down by 6 goals at three-quarter time. And for whatever reason, I managed to talk Dad out of taking me to training that day, and God am I glad I was successful, because what would unfold in that last quarter was insane. Now, I do think there was a pretty big breeze, but the Eagles pulled off what I think at the time was the 5th biggest ever comeback in the AFL from 54 points. And it was like the 14-minute mark of the third quarter where we were 54 points down. I'm pretty sure Embley kicks a massive goal from outside 50. I think Nikoski also joins in the party. And Adam Hunter's wearing a headband and he bobs up and kicks a late goal. And the Eagles win from 54 points down. Like, that remains one of the most exciting games I've ever witnessed. And I remember saying to Dad at the time, because we hadn't obviously won a premiership yet, but I said, if we hold on and win here, I would actually prefer that to winning a premiership, which is stupid because I was a stupid 12-year-old kid. But thankfully, we ended up doing both. So let's talk about the 2006 Grand Final. Now, luckily, around June of that year, my parents decided to buy tickets to the Grand Final, not knowing who was going to play. Great call in the end. And it obviously was sort of predicated on the fact that the Eagles were a good team and we had played in the last year's Grand Final. Now, I'm sure if we're Eagles fans, particularly if you've been an Eagles fan for a while, we all have our own memories of that day, and otherwise we've probably watched the highlights. So as far as my own experience goes, I happened to be flying to Adelaide for a Taekwondo National Championships the week before the Grand Final, and it just happened to unfold that West Coast would have an away prelim against the Adelaide Crows the week before. So I'm not sure how. Mum called in a few favours. We got tickets to the prelim, and that game started rough. We were sat amongst like tons of Adelaide Crows fans. This was Amy Stadium. This was pre-Adelaide Oval. And the breeze was a nightmare that game. And I feel like I sat near Ashley Hanson's mum, because there was a woman calling out Ashley every time he got the ball. I don't know if that's true. Either way, a really good comeback. It was a low-scoring game, tough conditions. Cuz, Judd and Kerr do their thing, and we somehow beat the Crows to get into a grand final. I remember taking public transport in Adelaide back from that game, and it was a very, very quiet bus, and I was the only bloke wearing an Eagles jumper. I say bloke, I was 12 years old, and that's probably why they didn't beat me up. But I do remember waking up in a Melbourne hotel room the morning of the grand final and just being filled with excitement. And the first half of that game went really well. I think we were up 55 to 30 at halftime. I have a distinct memory of walking from my seat to go get a hot dog or whatever it was at halftime. And I remember the 12-year-old version of me walking along behind my dad going, "What a great first half." And I remember a lady who was working in the canteen laughed. But as we all know, Sydney came back in the second half, really closed the gap. I distinctly remember a lot of their goals coming towards me. I was on the side where Adam Goods broke out of the centre stoppage and kicked a long goal about 10 seconds into the last quarter. And it was just an arm wrestle. I remember being on the far side of the ground when Stephen Armstrong kicked that goal. When you're at a game like that, you sort of see it happening in the distance, but you kind of watch what the crowd's doing. So I was sat at the same end for both grand finals, actually. And in both cases, I didn't really see exactly what was going on. I just saw the Eagles crowd erupt. I did, however, get a very, very close-up look at, I think it was maybe Schneider, kicks a goal towards us in the last quarter, and then after Chick and Hunter combined for that goal, one of the last plays of that game is Malcheski's snap, and I do remember that ball curling towards me. So my memories of the siren, I remember thinking there was a lot longer left in the game because, you know, your emotions distort your perception. I thought there was way longer left. You have no idea how much time's left. Ball gets thrown in. I think I have my face in my hands, and I just, you know, I hear the siren and my dad leaps straight up, and as does my mum, and I'm the last one to react. And I have really good memories of just having my arms around both parents at that time and feeling like that was the best day of my life. But the best was still to come. So the next bunch of memories are non-premiership memories. Obviously, the Eagles went into a bit of a rebuild through 08, 9, and 10. But the next good memory I have, and this is one of my favourite memories, is when the Eagles beat the Bulldogs at what was called Telstra Dome back then in 2009. Now, at this current point in my life, I had moved to the Middle East, and technology and, you know, the AFL website and even YouTube weren't what they are now, and it was actually pretty hard to keep up with the game. So there was no mechanism for me to watch the game live. I used to follow the games listening to 6PR, and if the game was early, like the Melbourne games always tended to be, as a, you know, nocturnal teenager, I didn't really get up for that many Eagles games. I would kind of just catch up later. But I have this distinct memory of opening up afl.com.au and just seeing this banner, this article that said Eagle Rock, and I had a picture of Andrew Embley celebrating like that, and the Eagles had knocked off the team that would eventually come third that year. Now, it's kind of weird that this would become such a big memory for me as an Eagles fan, but we were such rank underdogs that year. We ended up finishing 11th, but up until the last 5 games, we were certainly a spoon contender. And I would later find a way to torrent that game, download it, and I would just watch it over and over again. And it was so many amazing memories from that game. Andrew Embley had 4 goals and 32 touches. LeCras had 3 goals and 23, including the game winner. And at one point, I think we led by like 47 points in that game. It was just the most ridiculous result to wake up to, and it remains probably one of the Eagles games that I've watched the most in my life. So let's move to 2010. Because 2009 ended well, but 2010 as a season did not go well. We obviously won the wooden spoon that year, but there was one amazing Eagles memory that I think we will all remember if we're Eagles fans. We definitely will. I'm talking about when Mark LeCras randomly kicked 12 goals at Telstra Dome as we beat Essendon by 5 goals. Now, we were distantly bottom of the ladder. I looked it up. We were 2 games off the next worst team. But again, this is still in my not really able to watch football era, but still being obsessed about the Eagles. And I remember we were in the middle of Abu Dhabi birthday shopping for my mum. And obviously this is the days before iPhones or anything like that, so I had no idea what the score was. And it's crazy to me now. Even for something important like birthday shopping, it is crazy to me to think that me and my dad went out to the shops instead of watching an Eagles game. So I don't know what the hell happened there, but I do distinctly remember getting home. There was a few minutes left in the game, and I said to Dad, "Oh my God." And he's like, "What?" And I checked the score, and LeCras had 11 goals. So again, it's weird that I didn't really watch the game, but it still serves as one of my powerful Eagles memories, purely because of how amazing it was. I think it might even still remain the most goals kicked at Marvel Stadium. But again, it's a game that I downloaded, watched a billion times, watched the highlights on YouTube. In a season where everything was going wrong, we finished with our first wooden spoon that year, LeCras kicking 12 goals and announcing himself as a bit of a superstar. That is a really strong core Eagles memory for me. And you know, the cool thing about that game as well, the way he played, like those goals were not gimmies. There might have been one gimme, but a lot of them were strong marks, set shots from the boundary, a snap from the boundary. I think he also gave one off to strike. He could have had 13. So yeah, if you're a young Eagles fan, you haven't seen that game, go watch it on YouTube. It was fantastic. Then in 2011, now 2011 has so many good memories. I've only plucked 2, and I think I'm going to do this series from now on where I do a bit of a rewind and I go and review like past Eagles seasons on this channel. I think that's going to be cool, but I've picked 2 from 2011. Now the first one is actually when we played the Western Bulldogs. I'm not sure what round it was, but it was fairly early. Now, don't forget, this is like less than 12 months removed from LeCras kicking 12 and us, you know, still being bottom of the ladder. We played against the Dogs who finished 4th the previous year, and we were the reigning wooden spooners. 2011, we came out of that year and we just looked a different team. We'd innovated tactically. We had like Kerr back into the side, Embley playing well. Shuey also announced himself as one of the young guns of the competition. He came 2nd in the Rising Star that year. But this game stands out to me as the breakout of Luke Shuey, but also the breakout of Josh Kennedy. So we just blitzed the Western Bulldogs, and I mean smashed them. It was actually our biggest ever win against the Western Bulldogs. We won this game by 123 points. We kicked 17 goals in the second half. But the thing that stands out for me is not even Josh Kennedy kicking 10, although that is absolutely amazing. It was Luke Shuey. Luke Shuey was my favourite player, remains my favourite Eagle ever. He had 5 goals, 27 touches, 8 tackles in this game, and didn't even get 3 Brownlow votes. You'd understand when Josh Kennedy kicks 10, but this for me was like a real turning of the tide. The Eagles had arrived. And after after, 3 rubbish years and I just become obsessed with the Eagles, this was such an important moment for me. Embley also played really well. He's a player that I forgot how good he was in that 2011 period. So again, the season of 2011 requires its own video, but I want to talk about the semi-final against Carlton. Now, the Eagles had finished 4th that year and, beaten a lot of teams we weren't expected to beat. And I remember Carlton kind of being like a little temporary rival with us because we were obviously coming off the spoon and there was this debate between Carlton and West Coast. We were both battling for 4th spot. Who was better? And I distinctly remember us beating them at Marvel, which is another game that could have made this list, honestly. But we met them in the finals. We obviously beat them out for 4th spot. And I remember as an Eagles fan, first year with a pretty young list, any achievement in the finals itself was kind of a bonus. But it still would have sucked to go out in straight sets. So we played Carlton at Subiaco Oval, and I gotta say, I didn't really like the tri-panel jumper, but there was something about this game in twilight conditions. Tri-panel jumper, white shorts. Anyway, this is one of the most tense games I ever remember as an Eagles fan. I really wanted us to win. Carlton kicked the first 4 goals. It was an amazing game. I think we were about 9 points up at 3/4 time, and then sort of late in that last quarter, we got a bit of a break. Pat McGinnity kicked a soccer in goal. LeCras goals. I think we got 21 points up. Then there was this ridiculously cruel bounce where the ball bounces over our defender. Jared Garlick kicks a goal, and then Walker kicks another goal, and this game went really long. I think Carlton had a few players injured, and maybe even one of them stretched it off. So we led by 2 points and 34 minutes had gone on the clock, but eventually we would prevail, and it just capped off one of the most fun Eagles seasons I've seen. Sandwiched around that semi-final, we lost to Collingwood by 3 goals in a pretty honourable loss in the first qualifying final, and then we got pants by the eventual premiers in Geelong, but that semi-final win legitimised us as a good team that year. The next memory to make this list is our last game at Subiaco Oval, which I'm sure almost everyone will remember, but this was such a good memory because 2017, I remember saying in my last video, was one of the years where, well, probably the only year where I kind of got a little bit disengaged with West Coast. I felt frustrated about where we were going, and I'm sure I was just being an emotional fan, but it wasn't easy to see a bright future, and it's amazing to think what would happen just 12 months later. But as it would pan out, we had to play Adelaide in the final game at Subiaco Oval. They were top of the ladder, and we had to beat them by specifically about 4 goals. Now, obviously, the amount you need to beat them by depends on how high scoring the game is, so it wasn't fixed what that number was. So it was a bit of a moving target, but it was roughly 4 goals. And we started this game really well. We had something to play for, Adelaide didn't, and we jumped out of the blocks, led by 17 at half time, and I watched back, and we were actually leading 83-42 at 3/4 time. So we were kind of schooling the best team in the competition. But there's some really big memories, big powerful moments in the last quarter of that game. I think with 11 minutes to go, we're about 26 points up, right on the precipice. Lewis Jetta does this amazing chase on Charlie Cameron and forces an error. And with 5 minutes to go, the Crows kicked a goal. It might have been Charlie Cameron as well. And that goal sent us out of finals. We were competing with Melbourne, and I think we were just behind them when Cameron kicked that goal. Only for a few minutes later, Lewis Jetta to effect an intercept in that forward 50, dance around a couple of players, kick a Manana goal, and we would somehow qualified for finals. Now, it's amazing to think that while I said 2017 was a frustrating year as an Eagles fan, it did produce 2 memories that make this list. And the Lewis Jetta thing might only be bettered slightly by what happened the following week. We took on Port Adelaide, 5th versus 8th, away at Adelaide Oval, rank underdogs, and we started this game red hot. We were leading 13-44 at one point. But this game was dramatic. Port Adelaide hit back, as you'd expect the better team would, and I think at 3/4 time we led by just 3 points, and then with 5 minutes to go, Port Adelaide hit the front. We trailed by 10 points, and then we kicked 2 goals through Pritis and Petrie, and funnily enough, both of those guys would retire that year, I think. We got lucky. Travis Boak nearly kicked what would have been the best goal of all time if they'd got it. Then with 40 seconds to go, Eric McKenzie pulls off one of the coolest individual Eagles acts that I can remember, and he grabs the ball just in front of goal. Instead of rushing it behind, he willingly runs into the behind post and forces a throw in. So game ends in a draw. It's extra time. Extra time starts poorly with 13 points down, which is a lot in 2 5-minute halves. Then there's an amazing Lewis Jetta clearance. It ends up in a Kennedy goal. And then you probably remember what happens at the end of the game. Luke Shuey wins a high tackle, gets a kick on the siren. We beat Port Adelaide, and I have memories of being at my girlfriend's house watching it with her dad. And it's kind of hilarious. As soon as the siren goes, when Luke Shuey's lining up, we all ran to different corners of the room, and for some reason, Tony goes and turns the lights off. It was amazing. Ultimately, it didn't mean that much because the following week we got slaughtered by GWS, but there was something so hilariously bullshit about the way we won that game that it stands out as one of my favourite memories. And it happened to be Luke Shuey, and I remember footage of the Port Adelaide crowd watching this ball sail through, through and it's just completely silent. So we're finally up to 2018. And again, this is another thing that requires its own video. But if I had to pick out the two best moments, I'm going to go straight to the prelim. And the reason the prelim kind of has something over the grand final is because the grand final wasn't that fun to watch as an Eagles fan. But on the prelim itself, I remember that was the only time I've ever sat sort of with the Eagles cheer squad. I was behind the goals, well away from my usual seat. And I was tense, Melbourne were shit hot. They'd come from 5th. They'd beaten Geelong and Hawthorn, I think, the previous 2 weeks. They'd also beaten us about a month ago in the season by about 4 goals at Optus Stadium. So I was braced for anything. And obviously we all really want to make the grand final, right? But it was just amazing to see how up our pressure was from the absolute get-go. We completely swamped Melbourne. Jordan Lewis made a really uncharacteristic mistake. JK gets an intercept, smacks a goal. And there was just lots of little things, like the bounce to the ball was kind of going our way. Like Luke Shuey gets a bit of an intercept from a bit of a lucky bounce and fires the ball inside 50. And we were just red hot that day. And I just remember the distinct difference between that and the grand final was that every goal felt like a party. When you're at a normal home game and you kick, 6 goals in a row, the 6th one, you're not really cheering that hard. But this one, every single goal meant something. And I just remember almost feeling drunk with joy as the goal sailed through. At one point, we led 63-4, and there's just a couple of other moments where Mark LeCras, little back heel goal, and, Alex Neil-Bullen marking the ball and playing on outside the boundary. Everything went our way. And, at 63-5, or whatever it was at halftime, this score could have got ugly, but obviously we coasted a little bit and we made the grand final. I do remember just the pure ecstasy of the siren. I remember getting emotional a little bit. I am a crier at football. You've probably realized this by now. But if you were lucky enough to be at that Eagles prelim or in 2015 or a previous one as well, there's just something so spine tingling about hearing the crowd chant MCG once the results pretty much been decided. That is one of the best feelings I've ever had in my life. And then there's a grand final. And again, this probably deserves its own video, but I think the Dom Sheed goal speaks for itself. Now, the grand final itself was a tough watch. I'd driven to the grand final in 2015, watched us get absolutely rolled by Hawthorn. I was in attendance again in 2018, and Collingwood kicked the first 5 goals, and it was deafening, just like 2015, and I was a sooky little bitch. I don't think I said much throughout the entire game. Even as we were catching up, you get a few cheers from me, but I was just so tense, I wasn't really speaking to my dad. I have distinct memories as well at quarter time, going to the bathroom, and because the MCG is not quite as good as Optus in terms of facilities, I was still in the queue 2 minutes into the second quarter. I have this memory of this guy coming out of the bathroom and tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "We're gonna win," which was brave. But I wonder if there's any chance that bloke remembers it or is possibly, watching this video. That would be kind of cool. But at the time I was like, no, you're dreaming, mate. And then somebody in the queue said that Liam Ryan had just done an ankle, which turned out to be fake news, thankfully. But I'm sure we all know what happened throughout the rest of that game. I remember being pretty quiet throughout, but I remember letting out a massive roar when Elliot Yeo kicked that goal too. I think that put us in front for the first time all day. And that was the first time it felt like a reality. We could win this. We were actually deep into a grand final and a decent chance to win, which was a massive contrast to how I felt in 2015. So I think you'd be crazy if the 2018 Premiership win, and specifically Dom Sheed's goal, doesn't rank highly for you as an Eagles fan, no matter how long you've been watching. I'm guessing there's no one younger than 5 watching this. For me, I do remember just being overcome with emotion when he kicked it. It was just pure adrenaline and, a year or two of some hard luck in my personal life, and just the ability to watch this team also grow from falling to its knees in 2008, watching every bloke on the list who played that day. I remember them all being drafted. That really meant something. But again, I can go into more detail in another video. And finally, I reckon there's been one more top tier Eagles memory since then. There's been some good ones, beating the Bulldogs last year comes to mind, but in terms of top tier feelings, I'm going to include Josh Kennedy's goal against Richmond in 2021. Now, this turned out to be an absolute freaking illusion. This was a complete mirage. I thought this game represented a sign of things to come. It did not. We've won 7 games since then, and we've played 50 odd games. So we all know that. But I'm just trying to recapture how I felt in that moment. So 2021, we still kind of fancied ourselves as contenders, and we played Richmond, who were the reigning premiers. There was a battle of 7th versus 8th. I felt like we'd underachieved to that point, but this game, we trailed 59-81 at one point, and we snapped into a gear that was reminiscent of the team that won the flag, and even what we saw for periods of 2019 and 2020 actually. So 2021, that was the first time we'd look like that team again. Josh Kennedy was amazing, and I distinctly remember really good performances from Luke Edwards, 27 touches, 10 in the last quarter. Even Luke Foley was one of our best Eagles that day, and it just felt like this was going to be a sign of things to come. If you recall, I think we had the bye the week after, and then we got absolutely slaughtered by the Bulldogs at Optus Stadium, and then another slaughtering at the hands of Sydney, and we've not really ever recovered from that. But I won't lie to you, that performance, I was at the game, I was vlogging, like you can find the vlog of it on True Footy, and the camera that I was using wasn't a particularly good camera that day, and it just doesn't capture how Optus Stadium felt that day. It was absolutely electric. Certainly the best home and away experience I've had. Another memory that comes to mind is Liam Ryan taking Mark of the Year to beat the Demons, and the pure joy of pulling off an extremely unlikely victory, which didn't feel super common with West Coast. So the West Coast we've seen, probably since the 06 group. Like the 06 group had this belief of, or this air of like, the game's never over. We're always a chance. And, in 2018, we kind of got that back a little bit temporarily. And in 2021 against Richmond, it just reminded me of that team we used to be. And it felt like a sign of things to come. That, as we know, we all know what happened next. We all know what happened next. But I just remember saying to my dad, I'm never going to forget this game. And I haven't. Because it was pretty much the moment everything stopped working. But anyway, guys, this was a bit of a rant about my 11 favorite West Coast Eagles memories. I could almost make this a series. I could make another video saying 10 more top Eagles memories. It kind of depends how this season goes. Like, if it gets really bad, I'm going to have to start doing more reflective content, but I'm probably going to do that either way. Like I said, season rewinds, I want to look at 2011, 2015, 06 and 18 are quite obvious as well. But those are the sort of creative projects I want to do in the background, in addition to, the week-to-week stuff I do on this channel. So I hope you enjoyed it. By all means, let me know some memories that I missed out, and maybe I'll include them in a future video, but I also just want to hear from you, even if they were, prior to 2002. But Carney Eagles, hope you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next one.